well, here we are. Welcome to our second Flights event, everyone. We are so excited to have you. We are traveling to Lodi wine country, as you know, and hopefully all of you have your wine and you're going to be in for a real treat with this panel. So I think that most of you know me, but for those who don't, I want to say hello to you. My name is Rebecca Robinson, and I am the Executive Director of ZAP, Zinfandel Advocates and Producers. And this lovely session is produced by our organization, thanks to our wonderful winery folks and so many others who make this possible. As I say, we're going to wine country in Lodi, and you're going to hear all about it. I can't wait to learn about East Side, West Side, Delta influence. There's going to be a lot of great conversation going on. Before I turn it over to our illustrious moderator and panelists, I do want to thank a few folks for making this event possible. First of all, we want to thank our Zinix sponsor, Tricor Braun, who's been a great supporter of ZAP for a long, long time. And they are responsible for our big bottles that we etch and sell at our auctions many times. So thank you to Tricor. We also have an additional sponsor, American Ag Credit, who's very important to all of our wineries to make sure that they can do what they need to do. And we also want to recognize and thank our VIPs, all of our media that are here tonight. And we have Ambassador Circle members and all of our guests for joining us. We are really, really thankful that you guys are sticking with us through these crazy times. We can't wait to get back to actual visits where we see you all. But in the meantime, this is a wonderful opportunity to connect and to reach out and to have these wonderful conversations about these fantastic vineyards. Just a few housekeeping items before we move on. Everybody is muted at this point except for our panelists. You don't need to be on video, but as those of you who attended the first Flights event know, at the end of this, we're going to open it up and have a happy hour. And so we'll be able to then say hello and interact to all of us at the same time. It's quite fun. To get the best out of this session, you want to be on speaker view, which is in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And that way you'll be able to see all of the panelists. And we do encourage you to use the chat box and ask questions, and we'll definitely be sure to feed those to our panelists during the presentation. And so you can interact again and be a part of the Flights event. So what I also want to do, Shanna, let's go ahead and advance the slide. And I want to recognize Lodi Wine as I begin to introduce this program and turn it over to Stuart Spencer. I want to do a real shout out. I think Lodi Wine has done an amazing job in the California wine community. They were one of the very first to form a wine commission and to bring their community together to start educating people about the wonderful qualities of Lodi wine country. And I think that that's a very exciting thing that they've done. And they've really been industry leaders in a whole host of areas, from vineyard management to marketing. So shout out to them. And we're delighted that they have been long-term partners with us throughout my tenure at ZAP. It's been really great. And along with that, I think I've known Stuart since I first started back at ZAP. And he's now serving as executive director of Lodi Wine, which is a really great boon for them. And Stuart also owns his own winery as well, Saint Amant. But in this role tonight, he is serving as moderator to lead this illustrious group. So without further ado, Stuart, I'm going to turn it over to you and let's get the conversation started.
Well, thank you, Becky, and thank you to all at ZAP for putting this together today and featuring Lodi, our delicious Zinfandels. We are more than happy to support you and support the organization, and we are delighted to have all our friends here this evening enjoying some Lodi Zinfandel. I would say to get the most out of this session, besides having on speaker view, I think it's really important you all have a glass of wine in your hands. It's much more enjoyable with a glass of wine in your hands than just sitting here listening to us for talk. You know, it's pretty surreal here that we're sitting here in January doing the big ZAP event via Zoom. And I wish we were all together again in one place, and hopefully that happens real soon. And but you are all welcome to come to Lodi at some point in the future. We'd love to have you here and share our wines with you. I know some of you have been here, and some of you probably haven't, but it's a great place to visit, and we'd be happy to have you. I also want to thank my panelists for joining us tonight too. Both Mike, Tegan, and Dan are really helping move this area forward, and I appreciate their time and willingness to give up their wines to be here as well and help tell the broader Lodi story. A little background on Lodi before we get started and dive into the individual wine to give people some context on it. You know, Lodi has a long history of growing grapes. When people first started coming to California with the gold rush, people settled in Lodi and figured out there was more money to be made making wine than there was to be looking for gold. And they started planting some vineyards. We had our first winery get established in 1858, the El Pinal winery, the West Brothers. And shortly thereafter, we started getting some Zinfandel vineyards were getting planted. And we still have some of these older vineyards dating back to the 1850s, or not the 1850s, the 1880s, still in production today that make wonderful wines. There still are an abundance of really old Zinfandel vineyards, pre-Prohibition era vineyards in production today in Lodi. They are under economic threat. The challenges of farming these old vineyards in this environment here in California is not easy, and we've got dedicated people like Tegan and Mike and Dan here that are helping keep those vines in the ground. And the one thing that's important to keep in context when you're thinking about Lodi and Zinfandel is that even though we have a long history of growing grapes in California, it's still a relative region in its infancy in wine production. And so when we first got started here at the Wine Grape Commission, there was only 8 wineries in the area, and most of those were large production facilities and very few actual Lodi appellated wines being made. But today, you know, we've grown quickly over the last 30 years, and now there's over 85 wineries in the region, and we have wineries all across California and even across the United States that are sourcing grapes from Lodi today, which makes it a lot easier for us to kind of tell the story of Lodi when we have delicious wines to share with you. There are a few things about the place that I think are important, distinct factors that really kind of make Lodi Lodi. And the first thing I think we need to touch upon is the climate. And Lodi is uniquely positioned in California. And you can see on this map, we're directly east of the San Francisco Bay. And because of that, we have all the rivers that drain out of the Sierra Mountain Range meet to the west of Lodi. Here, you can see the Sacramento River coming in from the north. You can see the San Joaquin River coming in from the south. The McCullum River bisects right through the Lodi AVA, and the Cosumnes River is the only undammed river coming out of the Sierras, and that is kind of in the northern part of our appellation. These rivers are really of what helped form the area, and we'll get into the soils in a bit because that's the other kind of distinct factor when you're looking at Zinfandel and old vines. But the climate and what makes it special here is because we are directly east of the San Francisco Bay. One of the coldest ocean currents is just off the coast of California here that comes down off Alaska. You have a northern mountain range and a southern coastal mountain range that meet at San Francisco Bay, and there's a gap there in those two mountain regions. And so as temperatures rise during the growing season out here in the Central Valley, as air is heated, it needs to rise and move up, and something needs to come in underneath that to fill in that gap. And that's where the delta breezes, the famous delta breezes that we have here, come right off the San Francisco Bay, across the San Joaquin River Delta, and directly on the Lodi region, creating a very distinct climate that has allowed grapes to flourish here for a long time. Just to the west of us, and why don't we flip to the next slide? just to the west of us is the San Joaquin River Delta, and there are thousands of miles of waterways out there, and you actually can have ocean-going ships go and port at Sacramento and stock to the south of us. We even have the occasional sea lion that's been caught trying to cross the freeways here too, which is a pretty odd sight to see. But these waterways and all that really create this distinct climate that we will get into. You know, what does that do with the grapes, and what does it do with the wines as we get into that part of the presentation. The other part that I think it's really important to understand when we talk about Lodi is the soils. And in particular, we're going to talk about, we're going to be talking more focused on the McCay River AVA, because that's where most of the old legendary vineyards reside. There are a few out in the Clements Hills area, which is just to, why don't we go back to the previous slide? Just to the east of the McCay River. So there's 7 AVAs within the larger Lodi nested AVA. And the historical region of Lodi is the McCay River AVA, right around the city of Lodi. And the soils there are this, what we call a Tokay fine sandy loam, but it's basically decomposed granite that is washed down from the Sierra Nevada mountain range and basically spilled into this region over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, creating these deep sandy soils that allow vines to flourish. And we'll let Tegan talk about his brand name, personal one is Sandlands, and his love of sandy vineyards. But the one thing that's neat about the sand in these vineyards is it also doesn't allow, phylloxera doesn't do very well in these sandy vineyards. And because of that, we have this preponderance of old own-rooted vines that are truly a unique thing when you look across the world of wine. There are very few places that have the amount of old vineyards and amount of old vines on their own roots as we see here in Lodi. But I think, and so those are kind of the physical factors that really bring Lodi together and make it special from a viticultural perspective. But I think the most important part of it really to bring it to life is the people. And you can have all the great attributes, but without the people to make it a reality, it doesn't happen. And that's where I want to give credit to all 3 of my panelists here, both Mike, Tegan, and Dan. All of them have basically made personal and significant commitments to the region and believe in it, and they're helping carry that message forward. And without their kind of care and love of the land and belief in it, nothing would be happening here. And we've got many people like them back here in Lodi, and they are truly a pleasure to work with. With that in mind, I think hopefully everybody's tasting some wine right now instead of just listening to me, because that could get quite boring. So we're gonna introduce Mike McCay, and Mike is one of our vintners here, and Mike is one of our smaller vintners that specializes in single vineyard wines. And Mike's been making wines here probably commercially for probably about 12 to 15 years, and I'll let Mike say exactly, but he's actually been making wines going back to 1994 as a home winemaker from the vineyard we're going to be tasting today. So Mike, what can you tell me about yourself and this Trulux vineyard today that makes it special for you?
Thank you, Stuart. And once again, thank you to Zap for letting us come out and talk about Lodi. Oh gosh, I have a little hair there, I think, on that picture right there. What's going on there? You know, what I think is very nice about Lodi and the speciality of Lodi is just what Stuart was touching on, the soil profile and the special vineyards that have survived decades around California, around Lodi. And when I look at you can see in the picture the Trulux vineyard, which you have in your glass right now. It's kind of a peculiar vineyard in that it's the old ladder style. By that I mean I'm about 6 foot, and you can see that vine to my right is well above my head. A couple things happened in this vineyard. This vineyard originally planted back in the 30s or 40s. It was interplanted back in the 70s. It is on a St. George rootstock. You can see kind of the twirliness going on around the vineyard and some of those vines. But it's very unique. I believe of the 3 wines we're going to taste, it is on the far west side of these vineyards. So closest to that waterway, the delta that Stuart was talking about. It's one of those vineyards that Stuart mentioned. I first made wine from this in '94. and I've always loved the profile. It's something that for a long time, we've got a part of it native, a part of it being inoculated. But each year we'll pick 3, 4, sometimes many as 5 times in this vineyard, depending on what's going on and the year. And it is 100% Trulux vineyard, 100% Zinfandel, usually about 2/3 native fermentation, about 1/3 inoculated. And I find you have the 2016 year glass right now. To me, this is a very saucy year, if you will. Usually you get a lot of forest floor, deeper, richer characteristics, at least this year's a little brighter, a little saucier than other years. And for our vineyard designated Zinfandels, we don't try and do anything else but pick the fruit, take care of it, and put it in the bottle. So it's not where we take a recipe. We're trying to make a certain profile every year out of that vineyard. We always like to say we like to let the vineyard speak and say what's going to say for the vintage. Our current vintage is actually 2017 right now, but I really wanted to bring something a little older out, being a 16, just to give you an idea that Zinfandel can't age. And I've had the pleasure with Tegan and Stuart to sit down and taste wines from Lodi and Lodi Zinfandels dating back to the 70s. And it's wonderful to see what's going on with Lodi, with Dan, with Tegan, how we're trying to show off these vineyard designated wines.
So we've had a couple questions coming in while we're doing this that kind of reminded me of another point that's worth making about Lodi. Lodi is a very significant part of the California wine industry. Some people refer to it as the backbone of the California wine industry. And because of that, you know, we grow a lot of grapes here and we have a lot of vineyards of Zinfandel. And so, you know, the question was what percentage of our vineyards are actually finding its way into a Lodi appellated wine? And my best guess is that's probably around 10%, and maybe 15%. It is growing with each vintage, but there's still a lot going into your everyday $10 California wine, and all your major producers are here. One of the other questions coming up, Mike, is, you know, how would you differentiate this version of your Trulux vineyard from the Lodi native version you did several years ago?
I want to quickly touch on that first comment. You know, one thing that's really fun and exciting about Lodi is being able to go out and find these heritage vineyards that have gone into these big producers for decades, and growers are getting excited about the opportunity to have small producers take a portion or part of the fruit from that vineyard and produce. We have another Zinfandel that for decades, for all of its life, was originally planted by Ernie Spanker that has gone to Gallo for years. And we started producing that about 3-4 years ago, and it's the first time it's ever been made on its own. So I think that's part of the excitement. Coming back to the native project was kind of something fun that started with a group of winemakers there. It ended up being about 6 of us, who the idea was to showcase heritage, old vine, historic vineyards around Lodi. And that was really a hands-off style approach. In other words, no additives. The only thing we could really put in there was sulfur. So you couldn't add water, tartaric. There's all these different things. As a winemaker, you're kind of handcuffed. You can't do anything, which was, I love. I think that's a great thing. So the difference between this and that year, a big part is the vintage. As I mentioned, kind of a saucy style. You know, it is what it is. When we get down, we get ready to go to bottle. We're actually bottling on Saturday. When we get ready to go to bottle, we don't tweak things out. We don't try and make it a certain profile, or it needs more acid, or it needs more of this. We let it be what it's going to be. So the difference is on that native project, and that was, I believe, that was the first year was 2012. 2012 to 2016. Biggest part, Mother Nature. How she comes in and changes between, you know, the weather, the rain, everything else that goes on. This is just had a little more barrel time, a little more age on it than we did on the native project. Native project was pretty much 12 to 18 months in the bottle.
That brings up another point, and I'm going to kind of pull in our other panelists here to get their feedback on the wine too, because I know one of your signature items in your protocol, Mike, is you tend to like to leave yours in barrel longer than most do. And I think this one you said is anywhere from 24 to 30 months often, which is a different stylistic approach and manifests itself in a wine. And so I'm going to ask our other winemakers just to give their thoughts on the Trulux Zin here. And I know they've probably both tasted it over time. So Tegan, you want to give us a few thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's showing really complete. I think it's showing that, you know, it has had bottle age, not that the wine is aged, but it's really come together. It's knit together very nicely. It's supple, it's pretty, it's, you know, kind of everything you're looking for out of Zinfandel.
Yeah, yeah. I aromatics wise, it is amongst the three of these wines, it is the most distinct. It pops and I think I would attribute that to the barrel aging and the native fermentation. Although I'm pretty sure Tegan's is as well, but it's just something. It's unlike the other two for sure, in a really cool way, and I enjoy it. It's fun to drink, and I like the saucy comment. I think that's applicable for sure.
Yeah, I've been tasting this wine for quite some time, and I think to me it always has a signature to it, and it's the wines it's easy for me to pick out, and I think that's in a good way, and it's showing today, so I'm enjoying it this evening as well. We've got another question that's come through too, and this is a little bit more of a complicated one, but it's kind of, what are the greatest pressures on the Lodi AVA? Water, Sacramento metropolitan growth, or other? And I think that really depends on who you talk to. Some of our growers would say it's the Sacramento legislature that's the biggest threat to Lodi grape growing. But I think, you know, from an economic pressure, you know, we've got plenty of water here. It is the economics. You know, we're in a global marketplace, and it's competitive, and the cost of farming is not cheap here in California. And we have a lot of vineyards, and you know, when we're looking at older vineyards like this that are yielding a lot less, we need to connect them with vintners like these that are willing to pay for those grapes enough to keep them in the ground. And so that's one of our objectives, is really to connect them with people that can put them into a bottle of wine and sell it, you know, for a price point that is still approachable, but still allows those vineyards to stay in the ground. Mike, you have any, as a vintner, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. Yeah, as you mentioned, water, not an issue. The pressure on Lodi fruit, it's very interesting what's going on. And unfortunately, we are seeing some of these historic vineyards pulled out of the ground right now. We saw a chunk of it last year, 2019. We saw it again in 2020. And I think that the best thing is exactly what Zap's doing, getting the word out about Zinfandel. You know, Stuart made a comment to me a number of years ago. You know, we were talking about Zap, and he goes, "Hey, you know what? If you're a producer and you're serious about Zin, you've got to be part of Zap." And I fully believe that. And it's just getting the message out and talking about Zinfandel, talking about these historical vines and what they mean and what characteristics they bring to the table. And Lodi has a huge area of old vine Lodi Zin. We talked about the McCay AVA right kind of in the middle of this of the Lodi, and it goes right over to the Tegan's Vineyard he's going to talk about. And it's just, there is so much speciality, so much coolness, so much just characteristic in these vines. And it's fun as a winemaker running around. We get about 2-3 weeks a year to really run around and taste these vines and see really what's going on. You can look at this vineyard and say, it's pruned great, looks great, it's old vine, oh, it's going to be perfect. You taste the fruit and you go, yeah, it's not really that special. You go to the next vineyard and go, this thing's beat up, it's crap, and boom, boom. Look at the fruit, you taste it and you go, holy crud, this is really good. And that's around Lodi, and that's still being discovered. It's like, and I've said it before, it's like being a little archaeologist running around discovering these new things. And especially out of Lodi, the biggest challenge right now is to show this off to the world and let the world know, what about Zinfandel? What about Lodi? And connect the dots and just say, hey, this is a really great place to be right now.
So we've got another question, and I'm actually gonna let Tegan answer this one too, because he's our California viticultural specialist. But the question basically comes down to: is it unusual to see a vineyard like this, an older Zinfandel vineyard, without other varieties in the vineyard? And Mike had indicated that this one is primarily Zinfandel based, and I wanted to get Tegan's thoughts on that.
Well, it really, yes, it is. Currently, it's not that rare. Pre-Prohibition vineyards, you rarely find mono variety plantings, but most vineyards, people kind of after post-World War II, there were actually better nurseries that were virus nurseries, but that could produce more plants in a short period of time. But the biggest thing was the two things that kind of happened right around 1980. There was the change in the grape varietal labeling, and it went from 51% to 75%. And what then happened after that was that some of the big wineries and a famous winemaker, family actually went to prison over, selling Merlot as, I'm trying to think what he was selling Merlot. It was one of the Franzias went to prison. And I know a number of people who in the late 70s, early 80s, young men who were instructed by the big wineries that if they saw a grape come in on the crusher that wasn't Zinfandel, they would basically reject the whole lot. And so there were a lot of people that I've talked to that around in the early 80s went through all their old Zinfandel vineyards and pulled out the Carignan and the Cinsault and the Alicante because, wineries were saying they were going to reject it if anything came in because of that big change from 51 to 75% to, most people at that time were really playing with those margins. So it might say Cabernet on the bottle, but it was really 75% Cabernet. And 2 years before, it may have only been 51% Cabernet. So I don't think there were a lot of old vineyards planted mono variety, but then, over time and through a couple changes in legislation, like people made those old vineyards mono variety.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things with Lodi during that time frame is a lot of those grapes were going to the very large wine companies, and they had grape inspection boards sitting there at the scale as these trucks would pull in, and so they were looking for these varieties. Where if they were coming into a small winery like Mike's or mine or Dan's, I don't have the grape inspection board there looking at every load. So if there's a few clusters of Alicante in there or something like that, I might have been happy, but it was a different matter at the larger production facilities that I think helped speed up that replanting process in some of the vineyards here in Lodi. But there are out there, but there's still some beautiful old mixed vineyards as well. Which is I'm gonna move on to our next wine here and our next panelist, which is Tegan Passalacqua, and I think anybody that knows California wine and knows Zinfandel should know Tegan, but he's the head winemaker and vineyard manager for Turley Wine Cellars, and purchased his own first vineyard here in Lodi. I think in 2012 was his first harvest, and
Right.
And since then he's learned the virtues of being a grape grower from the whole way through, and has done a fabulous job preaching the choir or the gospel of these old Zinfandel vineyards across California. So I want to welcome Tegan here, and my first question to Tegan is why Lodi? Why did he buy a vineyard here in Lodi?
Well, I think that goes back to the history of Turley. So Turley started making Lodi Zinfandel in 1996. So in 96, we actually bought fruit from a vineyard that's now referred to as the Royal Tea Vineyard. It's on the original Spanker Ranch. And Lodi grape grower Marcus Bokish was friends with my old boss, Aaron Jordan. And he was actually selling them Chardonnay. They were replanting all the old 1880 Zinfandel. And he basically said, wow, you're tearing out all this 1880 Zinfandel. And if we can't get $1,000 a ton for it, we're not going to keep it in the ground. And Marcus went and called my old boss, and they basically went out the next day and struck a deal. And Turley was making Lodi Zinfandel. And then in 1997, we actually leased a vineyard out in Clements Hills called the Dogtown Vineyard. And so we've been making that for 24 years, and we lease it and farm it organically. So that's the Dogtown Vineyard. I've been at Turley for 18 years. That's what brought me out to Lodi originally, was coming out, and I live in Napa, and other people who worked at the winery lived in St. Helena. So I was kind of, the person closest to Lodi. So I would drive out there and check on the vineyards and drop off rootstock and, drop off cover crop. And that's really around 2004 was when I really started spending more time in Lodi and, going out to the Dogtown Vineyard. And that's actually when in 2004, I met a gentleman named Ross Schmid, who has since passed away, who his family is, from the Victor area. And they actually have the vineyard that they actually planted a vineyard that Mike McCay owns. And then they sold it to the Kirschenmanns. And then the Kirschenmanns sold me and Mike both of our vineyards kind of right around the same time. We started working with Ross's vineyards in 2010. And again, it's just one vineyard block away from Kirschenmann. And I'd really never had a Lodi Zinfandel that had tasted like that before. And it really just kind of blew my mind because I was so focused on what Dogtown tasted like. And, when I was younger, I worked in a wine lab where Joel Gott made his wines, and when he first started, and he made the Mohr Zinfandel. So the two Zinfandels I was really familiar with were Mohr and Dogtown. And the Schmid just tasted, something, it was something very different tasting.
And so maybe we can actually go back to the map just to show people where Victor is in on here. Shannon, if you can flip back to that page, I think it's worth pointing something out there. So right in the center of that map, there's a little next to the east of Lodi is a little dot that says Victor, which is the town of Victor. And in that, there's this really neat spot and an abundance of old vineyards that kind of come together where there's this oxbow in the McCalmy River that has created this unique condition. And this is where Tegan's Kirschenmann Vineyard is, as well as Mike has, I think he calls it Lot 13, which it actually sits just right across the dirt row. But there's also this abundance of old kind of pre-Prohibition era own-rooted Zinfandel vines sitting in this neck of the woods. So one of the things, and one of the other questions that someone came up also applies to, we talked about own-rooted, and Mike talked about St. George rootstock vineyards. And I was going to ask this question to Tegan, but I think he's looking for something right now. So as soon as he comes back, we'll get his input on it. But what is own-rooted versus grafted mean? And for those that are unfamiliar, own-root means it's on its original roots, the vine's original roots. When phylloxera came through Europe in the 1800s and destroyed much of the European vineyard continent, they realized that the phylloxera louse had been brought in by American vines. And over time, they figured out that if you grafted Vitis vinifera, the European varieties, onto the American varieties, you could create resistance to the phylloxera that lives in that. And that is why the own-rooted vineyards are so special, because they only really exist in these sandy soils where phylloxera can't move about, and or the silica component in the sand is contributing to the toxicity with the phylloxera as well. And so,
Stuart, if I could,
Yep, go ahead, Mike.
When you were talking earlier about, the Sierra Nevada, you think of California, I call it the crux. The crux of California is the Sierra Nevadas that flow right down to Lodi, and all of that granite and that alluvial, that sand, it's part of that speciality, especially for Zinfandel, of Lodi. And I think that is just, I'm trying to bring the point home of how special Old Vine Zin is in Lodi, and how there's just a lot of great places to discover, and wineries that are putting out these special Zinfandels from those heritage vineyards.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened with Tegan. I don't know if his connection or something went out, but we're gonna taste the wine. So the Kirschenmann Vineyard is named after Alan Kirschenmann and the family that resides in that area, and it is truly a beautiful vineyard. And Alan was one of our great growers that unfortunately passed away too early. He was still on our board when I was here early at the Wine Grape Commission, and Tegan named the vineyard in their honor. The neat thing about this is, since he purchased this vineyard, I think it's about 20-acre vineyard. Most of it is in old vines. There's some other stuff, younger vines as well there too. And he's, Turley's been taking it, and then he has a number of other friends that are making wines from this vineyard, and other small wine. So it's really getting this really, half a dozen different vintners making Zinfandel from this vineyard, from the likes of Arnaud Roberts, and I think Nathan Candler's maybe making some, and others have made it too. So we will taste this wine. And Mike, why don't you give me your 2 cents on Tegan's Kirschenmann Vineyards Zin?
I like the brightness. I like it. To me, it's very clean, very just floral. I get lavender just up front, in the nose, very elegant. I think of a lot of different ways you could push this around, and by that I mean with different food. I'm always a big guy of pairing wine with food. I'm a wannabe foodie. I just love the crispness and the clean. I get a lot of cherry on it. If I had to pick something off the top of I'd say rack of lamb would go wonderful with this.
Especially about right now. I'm starting to get kind of hungry. Dan, what are your thoughts on
I'm drinking quite a few bottles of this over the years, and several vintages of it, as well as the Lot 13, Mike's counterpart. And I would say that the coolest thing about this wine is it is probably the closest example I can give of a Zinfandel being perfectly balanced. It is not too jammy. It is not too acidic. It is not too, pointing out in any one direction. It is very soft where it needs to be soft, but not to where it's flabby or boring, or it's well structured. You can just, it's kind of like if I could make a thumbprint of what I expect a East Side Zinfandel to taste like, this would be it. It is just kind of the quintessential example for me. And he does a good job of not hiding it underneath a bunch of unnecessary oak, or picking it at overly ripe and having it just be over the top. It's just, he did a good job.
I love the taste.
So Tegan, I think you're back. If we can get your speaker on. You're still on mute, so maybe we can get the mute off.
It said on mute.
The challenges of 2020 continue into 2021 as we navigate this new world of wine enjoyment. And when Tegan comes back in, I'll just let him talk right over me. So, Dan, I think I'm going to move on to your wine, so then we can kind of come back when
we can circle back to Tegan's. Yeah, that's
yes, fine. Yeah, and So Dan's with Oak Farm Vineyards, and they're one of our relatively newer wineries. He's the owner and proprietor there, and he is presenting his 2018 Mohr Fry Ranch Old Vine Zinfandel from Lodi.
Mhm.
That is a really neat ranch. I know it very personally, and it's a 224-acre ranch farmed by Bruce and Jerry Fry of Mohr Fry Ranch. They've been farming here in California since the mid-1800s and have owned this property here in Lodi since 1965. But this vineyard, it truly wasn't a really, this ranch was owned by three brothers before they bought it, and they broke it up into all these different blocks. So there's 27 blocks over 224 acres. Currently, there's 70 acres of Zinfandel, and in 8 different blocks ranging from about 5 acres up to about 15 acres. And they're planted between 1901 and 1945. And so there's really this neat mix of vineyards there. And I'm going to let Dan share his thoughts on the
Sure.
2018 Mohr Fry Ranch Old Vines Inn.
And welcome back to Tegan. So
Thank you.
Yeah. So the kind of the fun thing about working with this vineyard and just working with the Fries in general, just really probably the easiest growers I've ever worked with. So as Stuart was saying, these vines were planted approximately 1945 is what we're told. This is just shy of 15 acres. It's about 14.8 acres. And spacing is a 10 by 10. And of course they're head trained because of their age, and it is all Zin. It is consistently easy to get around. From what I understand, Bruce tells me it's around 3 to 3.5 tons to the acre, which for a vineyard of that age, I suppose, is quite good. I know that they over the years decided to go ahead and put some subsurface drip irrigation in, or I guess it would be subsurface irrigation. And it, as far as the fruit itself though, and working with it, we find that this vineyard, every year while it's consistent, it's just quite a bit different than, we have some Zinfandel here that's more on the west side of where our property is, and we're a lot closer to the Delta. This gives some of those east side notes. It's kind of a hybrid in my opinion of what I consider like a west side Zin profile, which is kind of seems to be a little bit more dark and jammy, and then the east side being a little bit, I don't know, more smoky-ish, and it's somewhere in between. And we have a lot of fun working with it. We try to do our best to we've played around with it. Like in 2020, we did it all native. In the 2018 vintage that everybody that has a bottle is drinking, that one was actually inoculated, but it is something that we play around with. We've also played around with longer aging in the barrel, similar to what Mike does, and then we've also done short aging where it's really only in the barrel about 10 months or so. My experience with Zinfandel for the style of Zinfandel that we're trying to make, which is kind of clean, balanced. It does have some oak, although we've done stuff that has no new oak. This one does have about 20% new French oak. For my kind of style of what we're going for, it has been consistently probably the favorite amongst myself and the rest of the winemaking team in terms of all the different Zinfandel vineyards we work with. It's one of those things where you don't really have to do anything to it. vineyard in terms of the wine itself. It shows itself really well. You don't have to get it super ripe to get flavor. We like working with this vineyard a lot, and really like working with the growers a lot. And I, if somebody wanted to rip this vineyard out, I'd want to fight him, because I like working with it. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, we both need to keep paying more for the grapes, I think.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that was just recorded.
Yes, I know, right?
Yeah. I think
they won't tell them they've seen this. But I mean,
this ranch is.
I will tell you, and it's nice being on with Mike and Tegan, because both of the other wines are ones that I really look up to. And like I said, I've drinking a lot of both of them. And I'm on been on the Turley mailing list for years, and drinking a lot of Dogtown and Kirschenmann, and I've drinking a lot of Mike's Lot 13 and all that kind of stuff. And this is kind of my take on making that style of Zin with maybe just a hint more oak than maybe what these guys would necessarily do. I don't know, but that's just just kind of give it its own oak farm flair, I guess. So anyway, that's what we're going for style wise.
I was just going to add, I think one of the neat things about this ranch is it really is kind of a look back into California viticulture. When you look at the old maps from it, when the three brothers owned it, across the 27 blocks, there was usually a block of old Zins, a block of Tokais, which was the flame Tokay, famous in the Lodi area, as well as blocks of Palominos, and then a block of cherry trees, because they each had their own blocks of that. And then there was one block of Alicante Boucher planted in 1922. And you always wonder, why was somebody planting wine grapes in 1922 in the middle of Prohibition?
Right.
Alicante was known as a variety that could be packed and shipped for home winemaking back east. And so it really lent itself well to that. And unfortunately, that vineyard was pulled out in 2012 because the production got so low, but they did replant it with
Alicante,
and a younger vine, new vine.
Notoriously hard to get ripe, that grape, by the way. So
it's its signature. So I'm going to kind of bring Tegan back into this discussion.
Let's do it,
since he kind of disappeared for a little bit there.
I had a quick question. Dan, how much of this do you make?
We make about 450 cases or so of this, each vintage. We take some of it. So we take our kind of the choice cuts, set it aside in its own tank, or if we're doing bin ferments or whatever, and set that aside for the single vineyard program. And then we also take a little bit of it and use it for, we have a more widely distributed Zinfandel that has a couple different vineyards in it, and part of this stuff goes into that as well. But we kind of pick our favorite bins and whatever it looks good, although it's all pretty consistent usually. But anyway, about 450 cases.
Very cool.
So we've got about 10 minutes left here. So I want to make sure if people have questions, make sure you're typing them in the chat box, and I will try and get the respective winemakers to address it. And I'm kind of going to throw one at Tegan here too, since we got cut off there. But he's made Zinfandels from across Lodi, and I think Dogtown is really kind of an interesting place. The one question is where's Dogtown, and how is it different from the Kirschenmann vineyard?
So Dogtown is in the Clements Hills AVA, and it was planted in 1944, and it's own rooted. And probably one of the biggest differences, it's one of the true dry farm vineyards in Lodi, and it was planted, on these kind of undulating, rolling, low-lying hills. And it was planted by a family from the foothills, which traditionally everyone in the foothills didn't have water. So they just kind of put sticks in the ground and let them grow, and, you get what you get. And so they never dug a well. They never had access to water out there. And the soils are, iron rich volcanic clay soils out there versus these light alluvial, granitic sandy loam soils. So the soils are very different. Dogtown doesn't have as much of an influence from the Delta breeze as Kirschenmann. I think the clay in the soil really makes a big difference. The heavier the soil, kind of the heavier the wine. And I think Dogtown's at that perfect mix of clay and decomposed granite and, volcanics. And, you get a lot of like darker fruit flavors and power, but it also has amazing natural acidity. The wine usually finishes at 3.5, 3.6 pH. We don't add acid to the wines, and Kirschenmann finishes in the 3.6s, which is really good for Lodi, with no acid addition. I think there's that difference, but I just think the soil type is probably the biggest difference that we're working with.
Yeah, it's often, people look at Lodi, we're relatively flat around here, and that there's a similarity to everything. But one of the things we're learning is we see more and more of these single vineyard wines being made across the region and how different they really are and how much they vary from place to place.
And unfortunately, there are not many, other single vineyard old vines from Clements Hills. And there's the Stampede Vineyard, but again, that's kind of this outlier kind of Chateau Gruyere, like it's kind of its own little AVA there. It's sandy, sandier soil that has some, iron in it. So it's different, but it's not really like the majority of Clements Hills that has a lot more clay in it. So, I think one of the reasons it tastes different than a lot of Lodi wines is there aren't a lot of old vines in Clements Hills that are being put into single vineyard bottlings.
One of the other questions too coming in is about oak use. And I know, Tegan, you've been very consistent with what you do in your Turley Zins, and maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so we use about 20% new oak. It's about 80% of that's French, and we don't use any heavy toast oak. And I'm using about 15 different Coopers now because I don't really want a French Cooper's signature on an American wine, is what I like to tell people. Like, there's a story behind that. When a friend tasted a wine one time and said, "Oh, there's a lot of Francois Frere in that." And I said, "No, there's not." And I was pretty offended. He's a pretty knowledgeable wine geek. And I went back and looked, and for some reason we had one extra barrel of that. Even though it wasn't heavy in the percentage, there was more Francois Frere. And I just thought, I never want a customer to kind of be able to pick out a Cooper in one of our wines because, it's American wine. I don't want people, talking about the French trees.
I've got another question, final question for most of you guys, and I'm going to ask this. Why Zinfandel, Mike? Why is Zinfandel important to you, and why do you think it should be important to our customers?
Real quick, I'll just say that I look at it as I know the actual history, but I think it's kind of unofficially America's grape, California in particular. And I just from that standpoint alone, anytime that we were doing any kind of an international stuff, when I'm pouring at events outside the country on occasion, although not in this past 12 months, we always get asked, like, okay, great, that I don't care about all your other stuff. Where's the Zinfandel? Because they don't have it, or they have the sort of Italian knockoff that they like to call it from Puglia, so it's just, we should embrace the fact that that is something that people are clamoring for, and I've seen that from different parts of Asia to all throughout Europe. I mean, I've had many of like Frenchmen come up to me at Provine in Germany, say, "Oh, Zinfandel, I want to try Zinfandel," you know, and it's just like, you know,
So Mike, what do you think, Mike, and for our consumers here, why is Zinfandel?
I agree with you. It's California, and it's all about California. It's the style it produces. Everyone says barbecue. They talk about the food, but it has a special characteristic of California. It's got beach, it's got sand, it's got the mountains. Zinfandel is just a great heritage grape, a great representation of California. And I love the spice to it. And I've always said, there's certain characteristics of varietal. Let's say Cabernet, Merlot, Chardonnay. There's a very small profile of what a great Cabernet is, or a great Chardonnay is, or a Merlot. But you look at Zin's like a blank canvas. You can push it all the way to the left, all the way to the right, and all the way to the middle. And by that, I mean you can push it in many different directions, get many different styles. But Zinfandel is something that you can create and let it be what it wants to be. And we're looking at 3 different vineyards that are all different. And you can do that across the board with Zin. So Zin has that open canvas that you can paint it to any direction you want. And it's a very, very special varietal that can do that. And there's not a lot of varietals can do that.
All right, Tegan, it's your turn. Why Zinfandel?
Well, I mean, I think one of the easy reasons kind of being a student wine is it stood the test of time, and things don't stand the test of time if they're the wrong thing in the wrong place, and if they were the wrong thing and they, kind of persevered and stayed there, then they are the right thing. And, I think the best thing about Zinfandel is that what do people come to California for? What do people come from the Midwest to California for? They come for the sunshine. And I think, Zinfandel really is a grape that captures that California sunshine. And, the sunshine is different up in the Mendocino Ridge, AVA. It's different in Paso Robles, but it's different in Lodi. It's different in Napa. But I luckily get to travel to all those places, and the wine reflects the sunshine that you get in all those places. And that's, what people love about California. And, it's what other grape do we have that's been here, for 150 plus years, growing really well. And, I just think like there have been other things planted, like when you talked about the Mohr Fry map, like what do they have left after that map that the brothers had? They have Zinfandel, and why is that? Why don't they have all Tokay or all Alicante or all Palomino? It's Zinfandel stood the test of time.
In spite of it being a pain in the ass to grow.
Right.
It's not easy to grow. All of us are growers, all 4 of us here, and we can all tell you it is not. I mean, Cab's a walk in the park in comparison.
Right. Well, speaking of test of time, unfortunately, I think we are running out of time, and we do have some great questions that are still coming in that maybe we can figure out a way to answer them after the fact. From, how does Tegan make his Sandlands different than his Turley wines, to, what gives Lodi the delicious fruit flavor, and, some other questions, and maybe there'll be a way we can get back to those at some point. But I'm at this point, I have to return it back over to Becky, and I want to thank you all for joining us today with this quick look at Lodi Zinfandel and some of our legendary vineyards here. And you are all welcome to come to Lodi. If you're ever coming out here, please reach out to us, and we're always happy to help connect you. Right now, we're supposed to be shut down, and hopefully that changes, and we can get back to visitation here real soon. But we would welcome at any point. So thank you guys, and turn it over to Becky.
You, Stuart.
You guys, that was amazing. In the fastest hour, I can't believe that we're already completed, but what an amazing tour through Lodi. And I have to say that, a couple of themes that came through that are so important. I just want to, again, recognize the fact that you were talking about single vineyards. And, that is so important in terms of recognizing the qualities of what's going on in Lodi in terms of elevating the aspect of, this great winemaking that you've been doing. And that's been our focus the last actually 2 years with our Legendary Zinfandel Vineyards program, is to really tell this great story. And we think that by telling the story and by getting the word out, it's really going to help in terms of the preservation aspect to this, because that is so important in terms of keeping these vines in the ground. And to be able to have you do that, we need to get the prices really to be able to support that. And so that's in large part, what we're doing is telling that story. So I just want to thank you. And, the other thing that I really want to recognize about what you do is your passion for this. I mean, it really shows with that last question, Stuart, the importance of, again, the preservation of our history and our heritage for Zinfandel and the great quality winemaking that goes into what you all love. And it really shows in the glass. So cheers to all of you and thank you again. At this point, we want to tell you that we have 2 more events like this coming up. We have a trip to Sonoma County virtually on February 11th. And I have to share with our audience, unfortunately, if you missed the announcement on that, the wine is sold out already. And that's what's been happening with these. So we will offer the Paso Robles, which is March 4th. That'll be coming up in the next few weeks. So please watch for our emails and be sure, if you're interested in continuing on this route to get those wines right away, order them so that you can be part of this. So again, want to thank all of you guys in Lodi. And if you'll hang with us, we'd love to have the audience now open up. And I'm sure they're going to jump on the opportunity to say hello and add to the conversation. So let's take it away and get going on happy hour. So here comes everybody as soon as Shanna hits the switch, and away we go. Oh, and by the way, as I'm bringing everybody on, I also I would be remiss if I didn't say that Mike McCay has been serving this last year as our president of ZAP. And I want to shout out to Mike for that, for taking the extra load. So we really appreciate it. And been a great advisor and again, a great champion for Zinfandel. So thank you, Mike. So are we all on, Shanna? Have we unpinned everybody here?
That's a big mistake when you unmute everybody.
Yeah.
We all like to talk.
Okay, so where's your?
Hey, how is everybody? What did you think? Pretty amazing wines, huh?
Share the screen.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Click on share the screen.
I would love
Remarkably
to hear
different.
how close
Right
the
there.
vineyard is to each other. If we could have like a map or an explanation as to the three
Here.
vineyards that we have,
Yeah.
like where they
Get
fit
out of there.
in relationship to each
Exactly.
other.
Okay, let's see if we
Right.
can get the map back up as Shanna is unpinning everybody. And
Yeah.
Stuart can do a little geography lesson
Just
again.
hover
So
over share screen.
as we go along. But we've got folks from all over visiting us.
Suzanne.
All right.
Hello.
On the back end. Now you're seeing the back end. There it is. All right, Stuart, take it away.
Okay, so so where you see the city of Lodi there, and that brown line right underneath it, that's going to be Highway 12 coming in. And so Mike's Trulux Vineyard probably sits somewhere around where the L is, just on the south side of 12.
Of Lodi.
And then Marion's Vineyard is going to be just, Mohr Ranch is going to be just to the east of that and just slightly south.
Okay.
So kind of like where the E
Once
is
they
in
start drinking it, won't matter.
River
Got it?
Okay.
on the other side of the freeway. And then Tegan's Kirschenmann Vineyard is right up there, just directly north of Victor, probably about where the T is in Victor.
Thank
So
you.
you can see the little squiggles that Shanna's creating. That's on the fly, you guys.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Shanna.
Weird.
And that
Good
was
job.
thinking about how close were they in relation to each
Suzanne
other,
Burke.
because they are all so different, but yet you see some shared characteristics.
You just said.
Yeah.
Need a little something.
I do that at work now, and it's much better.
We're just teaching you how to use Portal, not Portal. Sorry,
Not
Zoom.
Portal.
Zoom.
For those that don't know, the Lodi appellation is huge.
Yeah.
It's really, really large. Lodi appellation is massive. So in comparison to say, several other California appellations. So that map is kind of deceiving. It looks like our vineyards are close, but they're not as close as you would think.
Okay.
I would think they'd be about 7 miles apart, right?
Now you get
Somewhere
Uh-huh.
5 to 7, somewhere in that from
Yeah.
vineyard to vineyard.
Hey, you guys,
Drinking
I
McCay is totally
love this question that came up that you didn't get to. Would Mohr Fry be considered a Lodi Grand Cru? So you got two guys here that I think there's going to be no question, but I want to actually, I loved that one. So Stuart, Dan, what do you think? Is it worthy of Grand Cru status?
Well, I'm biased, so I
Same here.
actually answer that question.
Yeah.
That
both
means
biased.
he gets 2 votes.
Yeah, we're biased, but you know what? I've actually worked with Mike's Trulux vineyard before, and I would say the same about that one as well. So it's eye of the beholder kind of thing.
I know Jeff Kralik asked that question. I know he's a lover of all things French, but we're trying to get as far away from the French as we can here in Lodi. Lodi. So.
Oh, you're calling me out there, Stuart. Wow.
Thank you, Stuart. I really appreciate that.
Ryan Roses has a pretty good French menu.
Always call out Kralik.
Hey, Mike, I have to say this is a gorgeous, my first time having your wine. This is a gorgeous Zinfandel. It is so pretty and soft and approachable. Really lovely.
You enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
And I had a question that Stuart chose not to ask, but I'll ask it now. Each of your wines were $35, and I consider it underpriced. I really do. And that's both a compliment and just an observation. And so my question is that due to like Zinfandel not commanding much of a price in the marketplace? Is that Lodi compared to Sonoma or having a little bit?
Hey, Tegan, do you want to answer that on pricing and Zin?
Yeah, I think people who are I've always said, like, from a Turley customer standpoint, we have Zinfandel enthusiasts, not wine snobs. We have people who want to drink the wine, not put it in their cellar and come out and say, hey, look at this $300 bottle of wine. I'm never going to open it, but I want to show it to you. That is what, and so Zinfandel at a price point, we want people to drink it. We want to, clearly if they can sell it for a year or two, we want them to come back and, drink more. And, we sell a lot direct to our consumers so we can keep our prices lower. And it's something that Larry really prides himself on, being a guy who's lived in Napa for, 50 years. He really prides himself on, having wines that are reasonably priced, that you don't have to, like, when you pull it out, you say, yeah, I'm going to drink that tonight. Not be like, well, how much did it cost? Do we have another bottle? So, I think that's one of the beauties of Zinfandel, is you get that quality at that price.
You're talking about approachable quality.
Balance.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. I love it. I love it.
But not only approachable, most of them, when bottled correctly, last a long time and age beautifully.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
I find it interesting because from last time I looked at there was an HBR, Harvard Business Review case on the wine industry, and like 80% of the wine volume is less than $25 or $30. So I always find it interesting that we live in this rarefied view of the world that $35 is cheap. But most of the world is like buying cheap wine.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the Trader Joe's.
I want to take it. We did the tasting. Lucas's other. What was the oldest Zinfandel we tasted? Was 73? Was that right?
Oh,
Dave Lucas.
I thought, was it 76?
I honestly I don't remember, but it was mid 70s, right?
Right.
And how much we tasted?
I did remember.
Yep.
There was one that was corked.
Right.
And then one of them speaker view. Why don't you go and look at yours on speaker view?
Agreed. Everything was drinkable.
Oh, sure, of course.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think
It's always drinkable.
the question I always ask people when they ask how long they should age the wines, it's like, do you want that primary fruit? Like, is that the main focus that you're looking for? I say in the first three to 5 years. If you want something maybe a little more complex, that isn't just about the pure fruit. Larry Turley wants that fruit. He wants to drink it in the first 3 years. And when we used to taste with Robert Parker, they would always argue. Robert would say, these are 25-year wines. They'll last. And Larry's like, but will they have fruit in 25 years? And, the answer is no. And he's like, then why would you wait? So, I think it all depends on what you're looking for, looking from.
Where I'm going with it is Zinfandel has
Baby's falling asleep.
sit in that cart, and you can see 15 years down the road, you can still enjoy it.
Oh, for sure. Most definitely.
But a lot of people think that.
Yep.
And I remember one that you can lay wine down, a Zinfandel down for
Easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Mike, to your point, I think, was it 2 Zaps ago where they served that 82 Frogs Leap Zinfandel? I don't know if it was 2 years ago. And it held its color. It was still pretty amazing. And it was 80. I mean,
a solid wine. It was very solid.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah.
I was lucky enough to have some, not too long ago, some Beaulieu Vineyards Zins from back in the 70s when someone certainly famous was making them, and they were, 30, 40 years later, were just fantastic. So,
I know for sure.
Again, I think Tegan said it. Sunshine, California. I love that analogy. That was a great analogy.
I was really curious about the water comments because I remember when I went to Oak Farm for a Zap event, the question was around how low the water table was. Like, I guess they used to grow watermelons at the time. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I know water isn't a problem, or water isn't an issue, but is it a problem?
It is.
Yeah.
It's not the water tables. It's the availability. It's not that the watermelons were, they were, diverting water to water those. The problem is that it's clean and abundant. And so you can, like the vineyard next to Dogtown gets a ton to the acre dry farmed. The vineyard next to it gets 10 to 11 tons to the acre. So I think that to me really describes, if you look at Lodi and you put it in relation with the Barossa Valley or Priorat or parts of South Africa or the south of France, we're all at like 16 to 20 inches of rainfall. And most of those regions are in that 2 to 3 ton to the acre.
Got time to cut us off? No.
But Lodi has a lot more water than any of those regions, not rainfall. But
Joined us.
Yeah, groundwater. When we were staying in Lodi, we were across from an empty parking lot, and it was covered in these random melons. And it looked as dry as could be, but they were so plentiful and huge from the groundwater. We were amazed.
Yep, for sure.
So what's everybody going to have with these wonderful Zinfandels for dinner? What's on the menu?
Ribeye.
Wine.
More
I'm
wine.
actually cooking right now, so I'm going back to see you, but I think-
We're having sausage, a couple different types of sausage, chorizo and a Brazilian sausage, and also some piquillo pepper stuff with lamb. I think those
weren't
are
invited.
things that go with it very well.
It's midnight here, so we're gonna do steaks.
Just have one big ribeye.
We're still working on a Costco chicken.
They're working on Costco chicken.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that's making me hungry, all of that, the ribeye especially.
Well, yes.
Next time we're together, Becky.
I know, for sure, yeah.
Right.
All right, Stuart, what are you drinking?
Wine. Diplomat. I just had a big swig of the Kirschenmann Zin, so
Yeah.
it's been a long day.
What a good day.
It finished well.
Very nice. Very nice.
Definitely a good day.
Actually, I think all three of these wines benefit from air, so they're tasting better
For sure.
after they sit.
Oh,
here.
yeah,
So
for sure.
keep them till tomorrow. I think they'll even be even better.
Or tonight.
You mean our goal shouldn't be to finish 3 bottles tonight?
Well, save them here then.
That'd be impressive.
I already finished the 3. I was looking to open something else.
Go Laurel. Go Laurel.
Did you hear that?
I wanted to do
No
another
way.
shout out. I see Andrew Bottine down there in the corner from
Serious.
Tricor Wine Pack, and I just wanted to say hello, Andrew. It's great to have you join us. This is your first Zap virtual, and I can only
It
imagine
is.
what you're thinking right now.
Well, let's just put it this way. I keep,
How Zap is done.
well, thank you so much. Yeah, nice to meet you all. Thank you so much. The wines are phenomenal. I was actually pleasantly surprised. I got 3 bottles. I didn't know I was going to get 3 bottles, so my mistake. My wife's going to help me finish all 3 tonight, hopefully. I have no idea what I'm having still.
Well, it's great to finish. Thank
No,
you.
this is really fun. Thanks for that. Thanks for the invite. This is awesome. I really appreciate it. This is so good. And the quality is unbelievable. I actually learned a lot from Lodi Wines, which I'm so happy. I had no idea some of the stuff you guys are talking about. So it's very appreciative. You guys spend the time and donated time and the wines for us too. So thank you so much. Very, very
That's
happy.
great. That's great. Well, and I see other friends that, we haven't seen since last month, but it's great to have you. And I know I've been talking to some of you on the phone, but we've got our friends from New York, Dan and Terry Miller here, and all across the country, Jim and Joan. I know, it's just so great. Dave, it's so great to see all of you guys. And so this is really fun. It's, and then of course our media folks, again, you're now part of the conversation. This is how Zap rolls. It's really, it's building that Zinfandel community because, all of us who love Zinfandel love to hang with the ones who make the Zinfandel. And that's really, a chance to come together and to celebrate these great wines. So it's
Yes. All right. Yeah, stopping.
Yeah. So I think we're probably going to call it and let you guys get on your way for the rest of the evening. We've got more lovely wines to drink and continue the fun. Now, you guys will see, I know all of you at some point next week, it is Big Zin X. So, we're going virtual and we're going to have a lot more fun like this. So get ready. It's even a little bit more of a marathon as we broken the tasting out to 2 days, Saturday and Sunday.
I just want
to talk about the auction.
I want to be able to talk.
Yes. So we've got, and we've also got an auction. Mike is whispering in my ear, but I think that we're for those of you who are not already registered for the auction, we're pretty much sold out. But if you want to email me, we can set up proxy bidding and send you the catalog and get you all dialed in. There's some amazing packages. Some big bottles and some other treasures. So you guys can always find me at and participating in the auction. So if you're not already registered. So.
Hey Becky, would there be a silent auction this year like there was last year?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So we're doing things a little bit differently. One of the things that was pointed out to us is since we are virtual, we don't have to cram everything into 3 days. And so we are going to do an online auction as well. That will take place at the end of March, beginning of April. We have not set the date yet, but we will be doing an online auction. So watch for that. It's really important to pay attention to those emails that we send you. We know are always putting them together, and I want to do a shout out to Leah, who's over in the corner there. She's our membership and marketing manager.
Yes, thank you, Leah.
I know.
Shut down.
So she'll be getting in touch with all of you to let you know when that's going to happen. So lots more fun.
Why didn't?
We were the only ones on the
No,
whole
wait,
list.
no. That's accusatory.
Okay.
That's
okay. I'm gonna
accusatory.
look here. Hold on.
Becky. Can
Yes.
you use technology to help us
So we can hear you. We can't see you, Patty and Charlie. What's up?
Well, we never got unmuted. And so we were never able to talk. And I'm hoping that a lot of others were unmuted. And so we were just kind of frustrated. But it's okay. It was lovely.
Well, we'll work on the technical aspect of it. We can't, like I said, we can't see you, but you're definitely unmuted now. So do you want to have a last word and a good cheers to the new year? And
It was a wonderful evening. And hi to Brad and Suzanne.
there you go.
Hi, Patty and Charlie. Wishing we could see you, but
Oh,
we
no,
saw you last time.
just as well.
It's
We have a
your-
lot more wrinkles.
You're better off. You're better off for not having that experience.
It's great to hear everyone's voice.
All right.
Good.
Well,
It is.
there's always, yeah. And so we'll see everybody next week. Hopefully we'll be able to see you, and we'll definitely be sure that you're unmuted for what's to come.
No problem.
No.
Thank you.
We're good.
All right.
We're
Very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you. Great event.
Hey, Dan, hey, Terry.
there.
Hello, Mike.
Hi, guys.
Bye-bye, you guys.
Hello, goodbye,
Oh my
Mike.
gosh, we
Here,
missed you.
good to see
What
you.
have you done?
I read it there, Chick.
One last.
Good job, Becky.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Becky.
Thank you
Thanks
all.
all.
Thank you, Becky.
There's Mike.
I'm hanging up on you.
Adios.
I don't have control over turning the thing on.